which was actually a pretty scary experience for him. And it's just a tiny little lake.
Mm-hmm.
So these things are hiding all over the place.
Are they? Okay, let me ask you this. Do you think that they are hiding in order to invade?
Well, it's kind of a trick question, but yeah, I mean, they're invading. They're here.
Mm-hmm.
The invasion has already taken place. Let's face it. They do what they want with us. If they wanted to, walk among us officially, they would. We haven't had open official contact, and I think that points towards the nature of who these guys are. I don't think they're wanting to upset our society.
Well, if we saw a giant insect walking down the streets, I'm sure that would shock the heck out of anyone.
Oh, yeah. The UFOs could end the cover-up overnight if they wanted to, and they're not doing that. They could take over our planet if they wanted to, and they're not doing that either.
So what does this tell you? What does this tell you about their true intentions?
Well, what I can say is that the very most common thing that happens to people when they're taken on board is they're examined. We know that. There's been a number of studies that show that.
Yeah.
The second most common thing is they show a strong interest in who we are in terms of our awareness and our spiritual growth is what I'll call it, because they're very interested in alternative healing and psychic awareness and that type of thing. And you get also a whole lot of messages about what we're doing to our planet in the various terms of the energy crisis and the economic crisis and the environmental crisis. A lot of warnings against pollution and nuclear proliferation, which stretches back to the contactee era.
Mm-hmm.
The messages haven't changed at all. They just switched to the Greys, who are saying the same thing the contactees did, which I find kind of interesting.
So let's see. We've got the Greys and we've got the insects.
Right, the praying mantis.
Praying mantis,
those are the two most common type that I've heard, and there's kind of a catch-all of smaller humanoids, and also I'm getting some entirely human-looking ET reports. One typical one comes from this man named Stan Hughes. He's Native American. I'm not sure if that makes a difference or not, but he had this amazing encounter up in Idaho where a UFO basically just landed in front of him on the road and out stepped this human-looking person. He described the clothes, had boots on, and this human-looking person just stepped out of the UFO and kind of just looked at the witness, Stan, and with a smile. And Stan said it was a very emotional experience for him, and there was kind of a connection there. And he wanted to go into the UFO, but this man just turned around and went back inside, and this thing took off. So that's not your typical encounter that you hear a lot. And I'm getting more and more of those.
Really?
So this whole contactee thing that happened in the 50s didn't really end, I think. It kind of just went underground and was sort of pushed aside by so many reports of Greys. But I certainly have a number of reports of human-looking aliens, absolutely. My next book is going to, I think, shatter a lot of myths about the whole UFO experience.
Preston, over the years that you've been doing investigations and research into UFOs, extraterrestrial contact, visitations, alien abductions, have there been any significant changes in the sightings, the mannerisms of the visitors, the way people are contacted?
Not in terms of, time that I can tell, but in terms of a witness, absolutely, it seems like people are handled differently, and often I've found that people who have had a lot of encounters and are, towards sort of the end of, not the end of their cycle, but have dealt with it, and really kind of, sought out hypnosis or are aware that they're having encounters and are facing it head on, often have more spiritual type encounters. And I've got case after case where, someone turns from scared abductee, God, don't take me, to, I had a really interesting encounter the other day where they took me on board and they showed me this, or that about myself, or maybe a vision of the future. There's a lot of that where they give prophecies, which I honestly don't have a great record of coming true. But
right.
So I don't know if it's scare tactics or what, but there certainly do seem to show a lot of people images of future environmental disasters. So I get that quite a bit.
How about cattle mutilations? Are you getting many reports about cattle that are being found mutilated like we used to hear back in the 70s and the 80s?
Yeah. It's still going on. It's
Really?
not as pronounced, I think, or it's certainly not being publicized. But in the area where it usually occurs, New Mexico, that area, Colorado, Utah, it is still going on, and there's ranchers who are suffering devastating losses, and it still seems to be this weird quasi-connection to black helicopters, and so I don't know if there's a military connection to this or if they're just observing it, but that, I think, has to be explained to understand what's going on with this, and it's still going on in the same area where we did nuclear testing. So
Really?
It seems like either they're harvesting cattle for their genetic codes, which are hard to build, and need to be used for genetic research, which is probably what I think they're doing, or they're just testing our food supply for the amount of radiation and pollution that we continue to put into our food supply. So that seems to be a big thing with them, in terms of implants. That's one of the purposes for implants, is to monitor pollution levels in people's bodies. So I've heard that several times.
During the course of your investigations into UFOs, have you come across any extraterrestrials that were children that interacted with other children?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's probably most often the case when the witness is a child. So I've got a number of people, I'm always asking, well, have you had encounters when you were children? And they will describe having gone up aboard a UFO and played with other ET children. And there's a lot of cases as well of women, especially, but several men who have been taken on board and told to hold babies and said, in essence, that this baby is yours, or we made it from your genetic material. So, yeah, children are seen, and of all ages, not just babies, 4-year-olds and even young adults. And in fact, some of the cases where we see UFOs darting around are maybe children sporting, their UFOs. Because I've got a couple of cases of that, which sounds strange, but this gentleman, he was taken on board a UFO, and he said that the people who were piloting it were teenagers, and they took this craft and were darting it back and forth and chasing cars down the road, and this might explain some of the odd behavior we see. And so, yes, there are, teenage ETs out there. And they're the ones who are following people down the road and terrorizing them.
Exonation, our guest this hour is Preston Dennett. His website is www.prestondennett.weebly.com. And so we've talked about the abduction scenario. We've talked about USOs. We've talked about children that interact with extraterrestrial children. But I've heard stories about pregnant ladies who have been abducted, brought on board craft, and come back with an empty womb. The child that they were once carrying is no longer there.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty rare, but, I've got several cases of it, and one was really, really poignant and profound. This couple who actually live in the Nova Scotia area had an experience where the woman was pregnant. It was tested on ultrasound. It was verified. She sent me pictures of her pregnant, and it was at 7 months that the fetus went missing after this very weird night they had, in which they woke up and there was light in the room, and that's all they really remembered. And they rushed to the doctor, and the doctors were extremely interested in their case. They got pushed up to the front of the line to a number of high-level doctors, and their case received a whole lot of attention because it was a completely missing fetus. It was taken. And here's the weird part: is, they weren't too. They were upset, but they weren't like overly upset, or upset to the level, I should say, that you would think a person would be when they lost their baby, because they felt this baby was still alive and being taken care of. And actually kind of was fated to be with these guys. I don't know. They were pretty traumatized by the whole thing. They would not let me record an interview. I spoke with them several times, and they sought out several people in the UFO community until they finally, stumbled on me. And my focus was to help them first, which is what they were looking for. Just counseling.
What did the officials make of this, and how did they explain the missing fetus to the parents?
They couldn't. They were not able to explain it, and it was a very bizarre case. I mean, they had a very large extended family, and they had bought baby clothes. They had done the whole deal, and so this was, about as well verified as you can get.
Yeah.
So they did not know what to make of it. She insisted, they checked everywhere in their house. A month following that incident, she took off for an argument, and the husband called me just freaking out, and he thought she had been abducted. I told him just hang on, she'll probably come home, and she did. But that's just showing to the emotional involvement they had with this incident.
Was a police report filed?
I don't know that. I don't think so. They were pretty low key about it. They didn't want.
Yeah, but what about the doctors? You go to a doctor, he's taking care of the mom who's pregnant. The fetus is in its 7th month, and she goes back, and there's no fetus. You're not talking about a small fetus at this point.
No, I had another case that was very similar, actually, where a lady was carrying twins, and one of these disappeared in utero. This is not supposed to be able to happen, but it turns out it's called a missing fetus syndrome. It does occur, and they don't know what causes it. I think I do now. I think it's these ET guys, and the doctors were freaked out in that case as well. And in fact, the lady, the witness, could not get any information and was contacted by one of the nurses who told her that her files were being forwarded to some special agency and were being treated really strangely, and not in any way that this nurse had ever seen before. So there was something clearly that they knew was going on.
All right, Preston, please stand by. You and I have to take our final break. Exo Nation, good friend of the Exome, Preston Dennett, is my guest this hour. We're talking about UFOs, but I'll tell you something. Preston writes about ghosts, Bigfoot, Yeti, ape men, human levitation, out-of-body exploring, and much more. His website, www.prestondennett.weebly.com. And Preston is going to be with us when we do our show with Chris Brown in 2 weeks. That is going to be one heck of a show. We're going to do an entire 4 segments with Chris. Preston and I return on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
Just 5 minutes, everything is
With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com and www.mattstein.com.
www.prestondennettpodcast.com.